Hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie with Monarch Productivity. Monarch Productivity works to increase your productivity so that you can do more good in the world. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a productivity basic, goal setting. You're probably familiar with the Martin Luther King quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Many of you are working towards bending that arc in the work you do, be it working on equity, racial justice, poverty, violence in all its forms. These are problems that are not going to be solved this quarter or this year. They probably won't be solved in our lifetimes. Thus, we are doing multi-generational work in a world that focuses on very short-term outcomes. So, even though we're working on things that won't be solved entirely in our lifetimes, we can make a difference in them in the very short term. You might also be familiar with the quote, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step." That's the way we need to approach our equity goals. When you think of bending that arc towards justice, what's the first step or the first set of steps that you can achieve today or this week or this month? That is our framing for thinking about goals for creating multi-generational change. So with that framing, we can look at the standard goal structure with new eyes. When we're setting goals, you want to make sure that they are specific enough to achieve. To do that, you want to be sure that all of your goals are SMART goals. You want to ensure that your goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So let's walk through that using an equity goal. Let's say that your big goal is helping people of color get living wage jobs. To do that, you're trying to enroll more students in college. So your goal is enrolling more students in college. To make sure it's specific, how many students are you going to enroll? When are you going to enroll them? This term? This academic year? Next, you want to make sure it's measurable. You could track your progress. You need to track your progress to see how you're doing. You might be able to measure the number of students of color that enrolled, and you may even be able to measure how your work impacted that enrollment. For achievable, you want to ensure that your goals are challenging but realistic. Here's where you need to think about the other things that are going on in your work and your life. Every goal takes time to achieve. What will be competing for your time during the period you're thinking of for your goal? And does that goal fit within the time that you have? Or maybe you can shift some priorities to create some more time. That's when you need to consider whether the goal is relevant. When it's relevant, your goals are aligned with your values and your priorities. You may need to let some things go to create space for doing this important work. So here's where you might think about your work and your home life and how they impact your ability to achieve the goal. Is it the right goal for right now? If it is, make sure that it's time bound by giving it a deadline. So now that you've worked through your goal, you want to write that goal down and put it someplace where you can refer back to it. In talking with people who haven't achieved a goal that they've set for themselves, it's often because they've simply lost sight of the goal. When unexpected things happen and you get derailed, you want to be able to return to your goal and get back on track. Having it written down makes a difference. Actually, that leads to this week's resource. I want to recommend the book Write It Down, Make It Happen by Henriette Klauser. Several years ago, actually several decades ago at this point, I had the opportunity to work with Henriette in a very informal setting. We were both chaperones for some youth groups that were doing volunteer work, and during the day, the kids would go off and do their work, and Henriette and I would stay behind and do our work. I was teaching an online class at the time, and she was writing a book, and it might have been this one actually. Anyway, we were talking, and throughout the time, she was really explaining to me this concept of how writing things down makes a difference. Actually, in the book, she even says if you do lose sight of that goal and forget that you wrote it down, it's more likely that just by writing it down, it's going to happen. So I'd encourage you to read this book. It's a great read. So you won't be surprised, but that's your challenge for this week. You want to set a goal and write it down. Think about what that greater good is that you're trying to achieve. Now, what's one thing that you are currently doing? Can you finish that thing or a subset of it in the next 6 weeks? Make that your goal. You could set the bar low. But if you're just getting started towards working towards the greater good, what's something that you can do that you can complete in the next 6 weeks? Write that down. Use the SMART framework and make that thing happen. Use the comment area below to share how you're doing with this challenge, how it went for you. And if you'd like support reaching your goals, I'd encourage you to join the Monarch Productivity community. Our doors open for membership again on September 5th, and your first month is free. The link to join is in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next week.